Gon is a complex character. However, that statement is already one that some may beg to differ. Throughout Hunter x Hunter's long hiatus-filled lifetime, Gon has had a pretty mixed reception, which is pretty notable since he's our main character. The range of interpretations may as well be about the size of Morel's forehead.
God damn!
But Gon is my favorite character in the series and probably somewhere in my top 5 favorite anime characters of all time. Now, of course, Gon being the chosen favorite of fans isn't really the norm, especially when you have a character like Killua who is more overtly complex, traditionally cool, very well developed, and positively progressed right there, literally being that guy.
You're not that guy.
Or if you take a page out of Rick James' book and you want a super freak, well, there's Hisoka. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. One of Hunter x Hunter's greatest assets is its characters, and there are many to love. But for me, Gon is just easily my favorite. I just love that character. I mean, he's on my shirt, he's on my wall, he's on my car, that's my son. And I am tired of seeing all this Gon slander going on as I peruse the internet. And seeing as Togashi has made a return for the time being, Hunter x Hunter has once again entered the hearts and minds of the people, bringing hope to all, causing fans to reread and rewatch the series and inspiring those who haven't done so to give it a shot. However, with the rekindling of that fire, not only did we lose Lord Gwyn, but Hunter x Hunter topics and discussions have re-arisen. And recently, the internet has fed me quite a few negative-leaning pieces of content about my child, and now obviously a few posts do not the collective make, and admittedly, a few negative-leaning pieces is just like 3 TikToks and a random post I don't even remember, but they did get me thinking about my boy and inspire me to make this video. I just want to give my personal perspective on why I think Gon is a great and complex character, as well as maybe give some counterpoints to some of the more negative interpretations and opinions that he's gotten throughout the years. Bias included, because that is my son. Now moving on. There are many out there that feel like Gon is a pretty generic or, at best, pretty standard character.
Confess to your crime, stale end piece of white bread!
Another courageous, straightforward, energetic, not so bright shonen main character in a long line of strong and passionate punchy boys. I think that out of all the mainstream manga and anime shonen protagonists, Gon is one of the most developed and fleshed out as a character, and has a lot of subtleties about him that make his behavior as the shonen protagonist more meaningful and nuanced when compared to a lot of his peers. Gon as a person has a lot going on under the hood, and it all stems from his upbringing. Gon grew up on a relatively small island and spent most of his time in the forest amongst nature. Those two environments of small town girl and a forest baby reflect in just about every single aspect of his personality, mentality, strengths, weakness, and actions. Through spending time amongst the plants, beasts, and terrains of the forest, Gon has developed very unique traits and skills. He's obviously gained a supernatural athleticism, making him really strong, really fast, and extremely agile. These traits obviously come in handy during combat, for even when Gon is executing a very strategic plan, his strength, speed, agility, or all three, are usually if not always the linchpin of the plan. For example, when Gon was fighting against the Batgirl, that's this Batgirl, not Barbara, and the Owlman, Gon was able to come up with a strategy where he took advantage of their teamwork and positioning. And how did he do that? By picking up a full-grown tree and swinging it hard enough to send her flying into a wall. Even if you go further back where Gon was fighting Hisoka, he had to use speed and agility to throw all of these feints and immense strength to hurl a giant slab of the arena and then break it. But alongside his magical athletic abilities, the thing that really allows Gon to take advantage of his physical gifts are his nearly unparalleled senses. Having so many different species of animals to learn from and so much experience in nature, his senses have been bolstered to an unimaginable level. Of course, there are the basic 5 senses, right? Smell, sight, sound, taste, and touch. But more importantly, his senses in regard to awareness. His ability to observe, intuit, focus, and just all around general situational understanding are all ridiculous. These traits being so unbelievably strong that it's difficult to say whether Gon's physical abilities or his senses are his greatest asset. His observational and intuitive abilities allow him to quickly assess situations and make snap decisions in and out of battle. When invading Meruem's palace, the dragon dive surprised literally everyone, but Gon assessed the situation, identified a problem, and began to act to mitigate it before anyone had even recovered from the shock. He did this so quickly that it almost seemed like he didn't even notice that there were entire destructive nin dragons falling around him. Now, of course, he was fueled by an intense rage-filled focus, but still, he was able to do this before Killua, who already had suspicions of things going terrible, as well as already knowing what the dragon dive was. He even did it faster than Morel, who was the most senior and most experienced of the crew. Gon was able to grasp the current situation and act accordingly. In an actual fight, he's also very quick on the uptake. Like in the previously mentioned fight with the bat and the owl, he was able to assess each strategy that they had and very quickly counter it, eventually turning their greatest strength into their weakness and their downfall. Even when fighting Hisoka in Heaven's Arena, he was able to quickly understand that Hisoka's bungee gum prevented him from getting any kind of distance, and quickly moved to close the space between them. By the way, did you know that bungee gum has the properties of both rubber and even from the very beginning of the series, the senses that he gained from the wilds were paramount to his survival and growth as a hunter. From the ability to sense a coming storm or identify slight variations in creatures that would go unnoticed by most, all the way to basically teaching himself an aspect of nin without even knowing it, just through observing how animals hunt in the wild. His senses are scary strong.
それ以上こっちへ来るな。
なぜですか？あなたが声を発しなければ私は彼を仕留められた。何を不必要に怯えているのですか？
この子は気づいてたよ。プフが殺意を持って近づけばこの子は迷わず小麦の方へ突っ込んできた。
嘘をつけ。お前はさっき俺を後ろから殺そうとした。自分でもそう言った。ナックル、騙されるな。まずお前が本体でなく分身だって。その証拠がどこにある？
They even frightened Pito to the point where even before Gon had shown any comparable nin or physical strength, Pito feared taking any kind of action and believed that Gon could even be a problem for the king at some point. Though I said it's difficult to tell which is a greater asset, Gon's physical strength or his senses, in truth, they're both equally relevant as they feed off of each other. For Gon, having one without the other would make whichever remained pretty much useless. Without his senses, Gon's overall straightforward and earnest fighting style would most likely get him killed pretty much immediately. And without the extreme levels of physical talent, he just wouldn't be able to act on all the things that he senses. Gon's background as a forest baby is the complete backbone of these abilities, and plays a major role in how Gon interacts and sees the world. That sees the world part being very important, because I believe that living in and growing through nature in part gave Gon a mentality and belief system that is highly influenced by the laws of nature, the circle of life, if you will, as it moves us all. But we'll get to that later. As I said before, there are two aspects to Gon's background that make up the bulk of who he is. And since we've already talked about the wild child Donnie Thornberry talking about side of him, it's time to look at the other more civilized aspects of his character. Whale Island is a place that is fairly simple in nature. There are very few buildings, and it seems like there's only one town, and a small one at that. The port being the place where inhabitants seemingly spend most of their day, as Whale Island is a fisherman's port and sees a lot of outside visitors. Everyone on the island knows each other, and everyone on the island is probably all up in each other's business. Like, look at these dudes. If I were Mito, I'd be like, can y'all not speculate on my motives right behind me? Like, sir, get on. Also, fun fact, but in the anime, it's made out to be the case that Jing abandoned Gon. Like, he just spooted out a baby, dropped it on Mito's doorstep, and dipped. But apparently, according to the original source, that of course being the manga, that's not necessarily the case. Apparently, Mito actually forced Jing to leave Gon, and then lied to Gon saying that his parents were dead, then later lying and saying that Jing abandoned him. Though she did admit to lying before Gon set off on his adventure. But that definitely gives a different vibe to the situation. And honestly, the 2011 anime makes some pretty big alterations from the manga prior to Gon setting foot on the boat bound for the hunter's exam. And a lot of those changes have a pretty big impact on how certain aspects of the plot are perceived, but we'll get into that later. Anyway, Gon lived a small town life with very kind, friendly, close-knit people, where he met many fishermen and women from outside of the island who were likely equally as kind, and took him on dates and taught him things. But that life made him equally kind, open to people, and friendly, almost if not to definitely a naive fault. But regardless, Gon is an all-around good person and ray of sunshine, and all of that stems from growing up around equally good people, most of whom were adults who probably let him get away with being a bit childish. And as I've alluded to, there are those that feel like Gon isn't those things, that he isn't that nice ray of sunshine, and that he's borderline an actual bad person. But to me, that's the furthest thing from the truth. But once again, we will get to that later. I know we're putting a lot of things off until later, but look, this is a road trip. I'm driving, you're in the back seat, Steve's passing snacks, we're singing songs, Ben's passed out in the back. I don't know who Ben and Steve are, I don't even know who you are, but we're going somewhere, and we'll get there when we get there. But anyway, Whale Island is seemingly a very uncomplicated and simple place. Simple to the point where there may not even be an actual school on the island, as Gon hasn't had any formal education, and Whale Island is uncomplicated in the way that the most complicated thing that Gon probably was ever exposed to were simple disputes from those down at the port. Therefore, Gon has been left with a very simple and uncomplicated view of the world, and very little experience in dealing with the complexities of the world at large. So if you compared him to someone like Killua, who is his own age, they're almost the exact opposite in that regard. Being from a family of assassins as well as being one himself, Killua has been exposed to a much wider and more complicated variety of subjects. To understand and perform his job, he had to learn global issues, politics, advanced calculations, dealing with complex scenarios, and so on and so forth. His family, who are the only people he spends time around, deal with the exact same level, if not higher, of complex subject matter, and he often draws upon their experience and knowledge. Killua had a complex environment and life, so he's way more accustomed and equipped for complicated processing. Gon isn't. So when Gon gets angry at the Phantom Troop and can't understand their motives, or Gon can't fathom the idea of Pito wanting to heal someone, it hits a lot harder for Gon than it would for someone like Killua, or really any of the other hunters, and it causes Gon to act very strongly. And when Gon gets confused over Killua going off on some complicated rant or explaining some high-level math problem, Gon literally cannot compute. It's not because Gon is dumb, it's because he simply is not used to dealing with such things, because he never had to. In fact, Gon is actually very smart. Now you might be thinking, hold on sir, slow down now. And you might disagree with that statement, And this is probably the first real point of contention, and that is that people think Gon is dumb. He's on people's lists of not so bright characters. I've heard people comment on how he's battle savvy, but he's not very smart. Characters in the show say he's dumb. He himself has said he's dumb. So there's a lot of insults going around. Now, it's important to note that a character being dumb isn't a bad thing. There are plenty of instances where characters not being the sharpest tools in the shed is done purposefully for the narrative, or is sometimes just the quirky character trait. However, I think it's wrong and kind of ignoring a lot of who Gon is to label him as dumb, because he straight up just isn't. Gon does many things that take intelligence, processing, and understanding to pull off. So let's take a little dip into the world of psychology for a sec. There's a theory that goes by the name of multiple intelligences, a theory pioneered by Howard Gardner. Multiple intelligence breaks down intelligence into 8 different categories in which one can be smart. Those categories being visual spatial, how well you can conceptualize 3D space; naturalistic, how well you understand nature and natural processes; body kinesthetic, the use of one's body in intricate and skillful ways; intrapersonal, the understanding of one's own thoughts and feelings; interpersonal, the ability to understand and communicate with others; linguistic, the skill in using language written or verbal; musical, the ability to create or comprehend music; and logical/mathematical, which deals with using logic to hypothesize and find answers, as well as mathematical understanding. And if you look at all those different categories, Gon excels in almost every single one of them. Even the logic and mathematical section, Gon is very good at. It's just the math section that he struggles with. Though it is important to recognize that this specific theory of multiple intelligence is very much just that. It's a theory, and it has been both praised and criticized for many reasons. But because of that, maybe it's a little bit unfair to use it as the basis for the argument that Gon is smart. However, if you look at other theories of intelligence as well as how IQ is measured, there's much more to it than just quick maths, and that's important to consider when assessing Gon. Gon is often making quick assessments and intelligent decisions even under pressure, such as with the previously mentioned Batgirl and Dragon Dive situations. He also learns and picks up information and skills very quickly, as seen when he's using what he learned from Zeppile to escape Nobunaga, or even the fact that he was able to understand Nin, a fairly complex system, completely and utilize it in such a short amount of time. Not only that, but he's an outside of the box thinker, and while he might not know about global politics, he does have a large base of knowledge. It's just more specialized. And if you look at it, the only time Gon is really being called dumb by the characters in the show or being portrayed in a less intelligent way is when, 1, he's doing something deliberately selfish or just something that Killua doesn't agree with; B, when someone info dumps at him about something he has no frame of reference for, so he gets overwhelmed; or I, when non-simple or mental math is at play. Number 1 isn't really an intelligence thing, and it's more of a mentality thing, because note that even when Killua called Gon stupid here, and then Gon proceeded to call himself stupid, Killua was about to do something equally as stupid, and it was just a matter of differing perspectives and desires. And then B and Roman numeral 3 are once again explained by his upbringing and the fact that he's never had to interact with things like this before. There's nothing to say that if he hadn't been introduced to more world affairs or had a more complicated environment or even just like school, that he would struggle with these kinds of things. And there's nothing to say that he couldn't be better in the future. He is still just a kid. So is it really fair to say that Gon isn't smart? Seriously, could you imagine being told this verbally and trying to understand and comprehend it just like that at the ripe old age of 13? I bet some of y'all had to pause and rewind or even get to a second watch before you fully understood it. Me, that's me. I'm talking about me. The point being that Gon is actually very smart, but his background makes him very simple, straightforward, and unaware of certain concepts that are beyond the scope of his island life, along with the fact that he is still just a child. If you really watch him, Gon is always thinking, assessing, observing, and always making intelligent choices. Gon is not dumb. I bring up all this stuff about his upbringing and mentality and whatnot because it's important. All these things make up who Gon is and are the reasons for everything he does throughout the series. From his brightest moments to his darkest hours, they're all rooted in his upbringing. I think it's part of what makes him a good character that goes beyond just the shonen main character good boy. Now of course, Gon still does have that main protag energy and has many traits that apply to the others in that position. He's courageous, strong-willed, passionate, straightforward, very kind, and is all about friendship above all else, which is probably my favorite genre of character. However, for Gon, it's just the reasoning and effects of that trope that are really well developed, because his mentality is actually very different from the norm. Because Gon is very weird. Like, there are a lot of moments throughout the series that show Gon reacting to things in a way that are kind of atypical of his shonen peers, as well as many of the other individuals within Hunter x Hunter itself. When Killua tells Gon that he's an entire assassin, Gon, well, he doesn't even really react. Not with shock, not with fear, not with any kind of judgment. He's just like, he just kind of accepts it. Even when Killua said he stabbed his own mom in the face to leave, he doesn't react. And that's weird.
Buddy, you're weird.
Even when this child put a heart in a doggy bag, Gon was straight faced, just like, yep, this is normal. Gon was very matter of fact about the whole situation. And that's kind of a reoccurring thing. Even though he himself is very kind and would never really want to do anything harmful or bad to anyone, even being uncomfortable with the light scamming of people at arm wrestling, how he responds to the morality of others is kind of strange, and he tends to often not be that bothered by people being bad and is often just overtly curious about them. Zappai also takes note of this when he's basically teaching him scamming tech and Gon is just taking mental notes. I mean, think about it. Hisoka's a straight up murderous villain who may or may not want his cheeks, but Gon doesn't really seem that bothered by all the bad things that Hisoka does. He's honestly more curious about Hisoka, and even with all the murder and subterfuge that Gon knows Hisoka is up to, though hesitant at first, he was still willing to work with Hisoka, and he showed him no animosity once they decided to work together, even commenting that Hisoka couldn't hold the ball because he'd be too afraid to hurt him if he used all of his power. Even with the Phantom Troop, Gon wasn't particularly bothered by the fact that they were, murderous villains. He was really only bothered by their hypocrisy. I think that this kind of strange acceptance of people comes from his time spent in nature, as I believe his mentality was heavily influenced by the laws of nature and the animal kingdom. What I mean by that is, a fox bear, for example, is an animal that will attack those that enter its territory to protect its young. That's just what a fox bear is and what it does. You can't be mad at it for that because that's just how things are and you accept it. Killua is an assassin. Okay, well, that's what he is. So why would I be shocked when the man treats a heart like a 40 ounce? So if this is how Gon is seeing the world, kind of explains a lot of his stranger actions regarding people. If you're in the wild, you observe something, you try to comprehend it, you accept it for what it is, learn from it, and operate based off of your understanding. Because if you're in the wild and you make bad decisions or you don't accept something that is just reality, it can be life or death. So I feel as though Gon takes this kind of approach with people as well. And even though a fox bear might be dangerous, under certain circumstances, you can still call one your friend. The only real issue Gon has is when something betrays his understanding and operates outside of what he believes should be the case. Because remember, as we said, Gon's life probably hasn't shown him many levels of complexity. So once something goes beyond that initial judgment, my boy is just too stunned to speak. Nah, but he really be talking. But another moment where I think that this mentality is on display is his encounter with this armadillo that is of course an ant, because remember, these ants set this contest up as a death match, but Gon didn't really want to kill them, even though he accepts that the ants will in fact kill him if he loses. Keep in mind that Gon already knew that the ants had been killing people off by the truckload, but Gon isn't really upset with him, or any of the other ants for that matter, probably because, well, if ants eat humans, then that's just what ants eat. Can't really be mad at that. So Gon isn't really that bothered. Well, that is until it's revealed that they had been hunting humans for sport, not just food. And now Gon is heated, like my base PS4 trying to play Ghost of Tsushima. And now he's willing to kill this dude. Another aspect or different angle that plays a role in this kind of behavior towards others is, well, Gon is still just a kid. While Gon can and does often act with maturity, he still does have many traits that stem from him being a child. Gon has an almost naive level of trust. He has a boundless curiosity that's a little more than a bit gray in the whole morality department, and he's often driven by his own whims and desires. Those aspects definitely have their pros and cons, right? But the most important and almost completely negative aspects of Gon's childishness come from his selfishness, his stubbornness, and that he's prone to emotional and angry outbursts when he's upset or faced with something that he doesn't agree with or that he just can't understand. These are Gon's biggest character flaws, and while they don't rear their head quite as often as you'd think, when they do, the effect is huge. And one of the best places to see this aspect of Gon's childishness on full display is the criminally underrated Greed Island arc. Here's a group explaining the perils of the game as well as the systems in place that make such perils seemingly purposeful, alongside with having created a serial killer, and Gon gets upset and storms off because they saw the game in a way that he didn't agree with. Overly trusting and accepting of a murderer, pretty much disregarding that fact and, sending him on his way with a thankful bow. But nowhere in that arc is Gon's childish behavior more on display than in a good old game of dodgeball.
You can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Gon's selfishness, stubbornness, and inability to control his emotions are all happening at once, and they're all negatively affecting those around him. Gon, Killua, and Bisky have teamed up with Sezugera and Gorenu in an attempt to gain the Patch of Shore card, a card which both groups need to complete the game, as well as plays a major role in dealing with Genthru. Not only that, but getting a chance to obtain the card isn't easy in itself. You have to have a group of 15 people, which is already difficult because Greed Island is a competitive game where everyone is out for themselves. And while you can retry the challenge, you can't do it with the exact same team. So you have to switch at least one person out each retry, which means that every retry makes it more and more difficult to even be allowed to take the challenge. The point being that there's a lot on the line, not just for Gon and his crew, but Sezugera and everyone else on the island as well. However, Gon ignores all of this and lets his ego guide him into making the match way harder than it really had to be. He pushed his team into taking the most direct and risky plan of action because he was upset and wanted a complete and total victory. He put his team's lives and success at risk and then sacrificed Killua's hands for his own desire to achieve a victory that quote unquote satisfied him. And look, as much as I love my son, and even though it resulted in some really cool moments, it was still extremely bad behavior. He even gets called out by Sezugera for it, as he criticizes him for being selfish and how his actions could have had a negative effect on everyone, and may still have a negative effect on Killua. Sezugera scolds Gon in my place and tells him not to do something like that again. And then what does Gon do? He does something like that again in his very next encounter. He very nearly ruins the plan they had to defeat Ginthru, like, kinda just because? Like, essentially, he once again lets his emotions get the better of him, and he's upset by Ginthru, quote, manhandling him, even though they all knew that that would happen when they engaged with him, and he just decides to throw away the set plan for his own, losing 1.5 hands along with his neck meat in the process. And now, while his plan did technically work, seeing as if Ginthru didn't trip as if on cue, he would have gotten yeeted across the forest, he ultimately did fail and put his group's success at risk again. And he took on such an excessive amount of damage just to fulfill his selfish, emotionally charged desires.
Insubordinate and churlish.
Churlish and deplorable. And while all that is terrible, it is delicious character writing, and it makes sense for who Gon is. A forest child who runs around doing pretty much whatever he wants and doesn't really have to answer to too many people. So this is probably a good time to get into the idea that some believe Gon isn't exactly a good person. But to me, that's just very much not the case. I think that to have this negative perception of Gon can really only come from focusing on a few key events and ignoring the rest of Gon's actions and behaviors throughout the series. Gon is genuinely kind to everyone. Every person that Gon meets is treated with a full-hearted warmth and friendliness that's completely judgment-free. His kindness and care for humanity extends to even those who've harmed him or would mean to do him harm. Like, oh dude, you're a murderer who's killed, manipulated, and brought harm to innocent people? Well, don't worry, we'll use our valuable resources to heal you after our fight. Oh, you're a crazy ant that's trying to murder me? Well, no hard feelings. You can try to kill me, but don't worry about it. Oh, dog, you spent actual hours torturing me? Well, no worries, my guy, we cool. Like, Gon is above and beyond kind. He'll go out of his way to help others, is open and accepting of all types of people, and he's got his own sense of justice. Now, there are a few times where Gon has been indifferent to the loss of people's lives and left them to their fates, but that tends to be in situations where the people in question are purposefully putting their lives on the line, such as with the Hunter exam. Because the Hunter exam is dangerous, that is what it is, and that's what it's about, and that's what you signed up for. So, shogunaine. But other than that kind of situation, Gon is exceptionally nice. He's a cinnamon roll. Do people still use cinnamon roll? Tumblrnians, get back to me on that. So then, where does this admittedly minority feeling that Gon is low-key a bad person come from? Well, aside from the already mentioned selfish aspect, it probably comes from these two places. Certain interactions with Killua, and then everything that went down in this room. But let's focus on Killua for now. Gon is Killua's best friend and savior, and arguably, there isn't anyone other than Alluka that he cares for more or even close to the same level. Gon has a special position in Killua's life and he would do just about anything for him. So, occasionally that desire to support Gon completely and Gon's occasional self-centered desires don't always mix in the healthiest ways. Class, turn to page 70 and see example Killua's hands.
Ah, sick!
Since Killua is so determined to protect and support Gon, he will often go along with or make sacrifices for Gon's desires, whether he's asked to or not. So it's easy to get the impression that Killua is kind of being taken advantage of, but I don't think that's entirely the case. Gon is on a quest to find Jing, and Killua is basically just along for the ride to hang out with Gon until he figures out what he wants to do for himself. So by nature, the goal of the quest already revolves around Gon. But even then, Gon doesn't just ignore Killua as part of the equation. He genuinely cares about his opinion and never forces or manipulates Killua into doing what he wants. When Gon does feel like he's being unfair to Killua, he will ask him for his opinion or apologize for making moves that focus on his desires alone. Now, yeah, of course there are those rare moments where it's like, dude, maybe you should have thought a little bit beyond yourself. Once again, see example hands, but also probably the worst moment being when Gon said what he did about Killua not caring about the Kite situation.
キルアはいいよね。冷静でいられて。関係ないから。
That was beyond messed up and uncalled for. I was very disappointed in my son for that, and I did not teach him to act that way. But it is important to point out that those two main unsavory moments didn't just come out of nowhere, and it wasn't just Gon being insensitive for the sake of it. Because remember, before Gon and Killua had gone off to the NGL with Kite, Kite told them that they would need to be able to take care of themselves, as he couldn't guarantee that he would be able to look after them. He then says that if he were to get in trouble, that they should only focus on getting away. Neither Gon or Killua respond to that. Gon and Killua then later talk about this, and Gon basically says that he couldn't just leave Kite if something were to happen. He then asks Killua, and Killua basically says, depending on the situation, he might run. And then when that moment of danger came to pass, Gon prepared for a fight and Killua chose to run. Killua also wrote Kite off as being dead immediately and generally was way more aloof in regards to everything that was going on with Kite. Now, of course, the Kite situation affected Killua a lot more than he showed Gon, and running was the correct option, no doubt, which Gon did acknowledge, as well as the fact that Kite was super duper dead. But I think that Killua's choices and the fact that he didn't clue Gon into how he was really feeling about the situation stuck inside of Gon's head, and it came to mind and out of his mouth during a fit of rage and mental stress, which is very realistic for someone who is under that much stress and anger, as well as for a child who is prone to emotional outbursts. And once it was all said and done, Gon felt exceptionally horrible for what he said and wanted to apologize to Killua immediately. Even with the dodgeball issue, there was seemingly a silent acknowledgement between the two after the first Jajanken. Gon seemingly takes note of, hey, this might be messing up Killua's hands, but Killua basically says he's down for it, so they're both like, hey, let's ride. And while it is bad, I also don't see a world where Gon wouldn't do the same for Killua if it came to it. So, in my opinion, these two moments aren't indicative of Gon being a bad person. One moment is a person under extreme stress, anger, and confusion accidentally saying something that he truly didn't mean. And the other moment is a show of trust, loyalty, and support. And yeah, these weren't good things. I mean, look at this boy's face. Look at his hands. So while these things aren't good, I don't think that they're proof of Gon being a bad person or proof that Gon actively treats Killua poorly. Even if you don't buy my explanation for these two events or just think that they're too unforgivable, I think that to use these two examples as the sole reason why you think Killua and Gon's relationship is bad is to also ignore the bulk of what their friendship actually is. All the healthy, loving, caring, and supportive aspects of their relationship, a lot of which comes directly from Gon. Because while Gon can be selfish and while their relationship isn't exactly the most normal, because they're both very non-normal children, Gon is still a great friend to Killua and is and has always been in Killua's corner from Jump Street.
Right in the crack.
He didn't judge him for being an assassin. He confronted Illumi immediately and was ready to scrap over him. He rescued him from his family after the Hunter exam, telling him not to be a dummy when he was trying to sacrifice himself so Gon could escape from Nobunaga. He always tells Killua how much he appreciates him and how much he means to him, and they just have a genuinely good bond. Killua is literally only able to live freely now because of all that he gained from his time with Gon. So while, yeah, there are some unsavory moments that shouldn't be overlooked, the overall relationship is very savory? Sweet. Whatever. Gon is an all-around great person and great friend. And that good-natured, extreme kindness and baked good energy is exactly what makes his turn to the darkness and rage so interesting and impactful. Because all the aspects of Gon that we talked about are important in that lead up to that turn. And this is another kind of point of contention. Some people feel like there was no real reason for Gon to be so upset over Kite. Some feel like this turn just came out of nowhere, and others think it just went a little bit too far. However, as you probably expected from he who owns the Gon's #1 dad mug, I don't really think that that's the case. Surprise, surprise, I'm defending my son once again. Who would have thought? But to me, I think it all makes sense how Gon went from cinnamon roll to grown man in booty shorts. And though I hate to see my child go through such struggle and anguish, I also love to see it. I'm not gonna lie to you. And that is because I think it's very well done. So to illustrate these complexities as well as show why I think that they were very well done, we must first rewind all the way back to the beginning of Hunter x Hunter. Like I had mentioned before, the 2011 anime makes some questionable changes in regards to how it began the series. Now, I wouldn't say that the difference between the anime and the manga is night and day. I would say it's more of a 11:30 a.m. to a 4 p.m., but those slight differences are noticeable and they do matter. Because if you read the first chapter of the manga, you'll probably have a different perception of Gon's motivations as well as how he got started down the path of a hunter in the first place. Because in truth, Kite is the reason Gon became a hunter, not Jing. At the start of the manga, we see some familiar stuff between the anime. Gon catching the master, being excited to get an opportunity to take the hunter exam. But then we get a flashback to when Gon met Kite. Basically, it's the flashback we get during the Chimera Ant arc in the anime, but since this flashback is taking place at the beginning of the story, we get a lot of important details that do a lot to shape Gon's background, as well as a few extra that we didn't get in the anime. Gon, as well as the reader, learn a little bit about what a hunter is and what a hunter does through Kite. So you could say that Kite is the reference point for what a hunter is for Gon as well as us. And it really feels like it's supposed to be that way, not just because of this flashback, but because the very first character that we see in the manga is Kite. And Kite is the first character that they say is a hunter. Through this flashback with Kite, we also learn that Jing is actually alive and not dead, because remember, Mito had told Gon that his parents had died. Kite tells Gon a little bit about his history with Jing and how great of a hunter that Jing is. He then gives Gon Jing's hunter license now, not later. Kite then imparts on Gon that finding Jing was the ultimate test that he took in becoming a hunter. This meeting with Kite is what starts Gon down the path of becoming a hunter, and it's the sole reason that we have a show/manga to watch. And since I had read the manga after watching the anime, my perception of Gon's motivation and Kite's role in them completely changed. Gon was less interested in finding Jing for the sake of finding his father and understanding what was so great about being a hunter, and was more about being inspired by Kite, this amazing hunter, and how he desired to grow and test himself through hunting Jing. And that's not to say that he wasn't interested in Jing or interested in what being a hunter really was, but it just seems like Kite was the deciding factor and motivation. Even when Gon says the whole thing about how being a hunter must be amazing if you're willing to leave your child behind, it does really come off differently in the manga. But anyway, this is all important because the manga gives so much more validity to Gon being as attached to Kite as he is. Keep in mind that we don't even know that Kite exists until episode 76 of the anime, and the two of them act like they barely remember each other. That really messes up the importance that Kite actually has, not only to Gon, but the entirety of the story as well. because meeting up with Kite is not just a reunion for Gon, but for the readers as well, and a reminder of where everything started and how far we came. It's supposed to be important, but unfortunately in the anime, there's not a whole lot of weight behind it, which does affect how things are perceived later in the arc. Because before reading the manga, even I was kind of like, dang, Gon's kind of riding a little bit hard for this dude that just came out of nowhere. But once you actually get sold on the backstory and you realize that Kite is the person who kickstarted Gon's adventure and is the reason he even knows about Jing in the first place, you get better insight into why Kite is so important to Gon. And once that Kite issue is rectified, I believe that Gon's bout of darkness makes perfect sense and is consistent with everything that we've seen from him so far. It was a build-up and progression of certain events and feelings that conflicted with who Gon is as a person and manifested in an overwhelming rage. So let's look into everything that led up to said booty-shorted man hitting deep squats in the forest. The first thing to think about is that Gon put a lot of himself into the idea that Kite was fine. To him, there was no doubt in his mind that Kite was just okay. Sure, he might be in danger, and yeah, he's gonna have to get all of his shirts tailored from now on, but Kite is the pinnacle and reference point for what it means to be a hunter, and there is no way that someone like him could be killed by the ants. So for an entire month, Gon's entire being was invested into this being true. He was training and growing for the sole purpose of returning to the NGL to save Kite from wherever he was hiding out. And his undeniable truth was shattered when Kite was found to be very far from okay. This adding the first ingredient to that darkness cocktail, anger. Having a very important person drastically harmed, along with the shattering of his perceived expectation, sparked a rage that Gon would likely purposefully bottle up and let fester to later be unleashed and guided towards a certain Cant, who was responsible. So while rage had sparked upon seeing the mangled body of Kite, the second ingredient in this chest-burning cocktail was added: guilt. Because Gon felt fully responsible for everything that happened to Kite. Gon was the one that wanted to go with Kite in the first place. He was the one that had to be protected, and he was the one who wasn't strong enough to fight alongside Kite. Then, when he had the chance to go and rescue him, he was proven too weak to even do that, having to let Knuckle and Shoot go in his place. At least, that's how Gon is seeing the situation. Gon put an exceptionally large amount of blame on himself, only willing to share it with Pito. Now, of course, none of it was really his fault, but since Gon has that simple, uncomplicated mindset, he can really only look at the situation one-dimensionally, and from his own perspective, the only thing that he can really do is take responsibility for it and try to atone by making things right. And by making things right, that means defeating Pito and reverting Kite back to normal. However, Gon still wasn't strong enough to atone, and his fight with Knuckle showed him that. I believe Gon purposefully used his rage to boost his strength, his guilt driving him to do whatever was necessary to atone and fix Kite. And throughout the rest of that arc, that rage and guilt are all bottled up and festering. And there are moments where we see that rage and guilt in small actions and certain behaviors, but it's never unleashed. He keeps it just below the surface, and even though he's fighting and carrying out plans, he doesn't let it out, allowing it to grow and fuel him for when he needs it the most. And as soon as the infiltration starts, Gon shifts and prepares to smash that bottle of pent-up rage and self-loathing. But as we all know, when he finally opened up that bottle of rage that had been built up for so long, Gon was left without a target for it. Gon confronted a completely defensive and submissive Pito, which honestly was the best possible situation for them because they totally would have been killed otherwise. But Gon had single-mindedly planned for this occasion, so with his rage out and ready for action, everything that would happen in the next few minutes, seconds? I don't know, man. Time is crazy in that arc. But anyway, everything that would happen would only serve to add more wood, gasoline, and just straight up extra fire onto his already burning rage. With all that added fuel and fire, Gon's rage became an inferno like he was from Soul Calibur. He sees Komugi under Dr. Blythe being operated on and can only see visions of Kite being torn apart. Wood. Pito is non-combative and asks Gon to wait before they fight. Gasoline. Pito says that they're healing Komugi. Alcohol. Pito breaks their own arm to show compliance and prove trustworthiness. Yeah, just go ahead and throw a fire onto that fire so that you can fire while you fire. You know what I mean? And now, Gon is at a point where he's gone past just being fueled by rage. He's been completely consumed by it, allowing Gon to put his anger over his goal, allowing Gon to say horrible things to Killua, and whether it was a threat or a promise, his rage allowed Gon to even threaten the life of Komugi. But this wasn't a sudden turn. It was all additive, and the steps that led to these behaviors are all consistent with what Gon has shown us in the past. We've seen Gon become angry at the endangerment of a friend. We've seen Gon gain power through rage. We've seen him act very single-mindedly in pursuit of a goal. We've seen him be indifferent to the lives of others under the right circumstances. And most importantly, we've seen him be quick to emotional and anger-filled actions when confronted with situations that betray his expectations. It's all consistent. And every single one of those things happened throughout this arc, building up the straws that would break his back. Then, once Gon finds out that Kite is actually dead, it's like a repeat of everything that happened from the very start of this arc, only worse. Gon had invested himself into the idea that Kite was alive and could be saved. That belief was shattered. Someone so important to him not only had been hurt, but actually killed. Gon is enraged at Pito. Gon blames himself for killing Kite by having to be protected by him, by not being able to save him, and not being strong enough. Gon feels immeasurable guilt. Gon must atone and rectify what he believes is his fault, but he's still not strong enough. Gon uses rage and guilt to fuel his power and sacrifices everything to be able to get rid of Pito and atone. But since Kite is dead and he can't truly fix his wrong, he's willing to atone by giving up everything. So while Gon's behavior during this Ant arc is surprising, to me, it all makes sense. And I think it was really well done. And while you hate to see it, I also love to see it. Gon confronting Pito while they're healing Komugi is my favorite anime moment of all time. I love it that much. And in these moments during this arc, every ounce of his behavior leads right back to everything that we've been talking about. From his upbringing, to his mentality, to his childishness, all there, black and white.
Clear as crystal.
The idea that this level of darkness could still be consistent with the level of sunshine that Gon has is a telltale sign of how well developed as a character Gon is, as well as how much is actually going on beneath the hood. And it just shows what a good character Gon actually is. Obviously, this video has just been my interpretation of Gon, and it's very much how I see him, but regardless, I think Gon is amazingly written and has so much going on. Of course, he's by no means the greatest written character in all of fiction, nor do I necessarily even think that he's the #1 best written character in the series, but I think that he has an unappreciated amount of depth to him, and he is for sure my favorite. The courageous, passionate, strong-willed character type is already my favorite, and seeing how well developed, fleshed out, and nuanced it is for Gon is something I love to watch. Beyond just liking him for his brightness, courageousness, cleverosity, and strength, I think that it's really cool to see how everything that Gon is interacts with and plays off the complex world of Hunter x Hunter. And his friendship with Killua is one of, if not my favorite bond in all of anime and manga. His every action and reaction is rooted in who he is as a person and the environment that he was raised in. From his brightest moments to his darkest, it's all Gon with a capital G. So even though Gon himself may be straightforward and a simple person at heart, to me, Gon is indeed a complicated character.